Nutrition program established a food policy council in 2010. In 2011, we established a governing board, and today we have 15 governing board members, which include founder Danny Constantine, chair Amy Seitz, vice chair Ronalda Anguson, treasurer Mel Sykes. I'm the secretary. There's Kara Durr, Lorinda Lotka, Marissa Wilson, Sarah Reinard, Evie Witten, Heidi Rader, Tikon Galbraith, and our new board members, Kyle Hill and Glenna Gannon. Sorry, Glenna. And continuing with AFPC's history, by 2014, AFPC received 501c3 status as a nonprofit organization and hosted its first food festival and conference, which was at UAA. Here I am in my office. And these conferences are held every 18 months. Our intention this year was to have a hybrid conference because we would love to see you face to face as well. But to err on the side of safety, we decided to, due to COVID, decided to have a hybrid or a virtual conference. So hopefully next time we can have a hybrid conference, and we would love to see everyone face to face. And for those who can't attend face to face, virtually as well. So throughout the last several years, AFPC has participated in and supported many projects, which I am so proud of, such as participating in the development of statewide emergency feeding plan, provided recommendations for the municipality of Anchorage, urging action on food priorities, facilitating local food mini grants, and conducting statewide food system workshops. By 2020, we hired our first executive director. That's huge, right? And her name is Robbie Mixon. Don't know what we would do without her, to be honest. Yes, yay, I see some folks clapping. Please, cheers for Robbie. She's amazing. And I'm sorry, Robbie, if I just embarrassed you. And today we are having our 6th conference. Can you believe it? This is so exciting. AFPC continues to grow, focusing on health, self-reliance, and prosperity. I am not only proud to be a part of AFPC, but I am so proud to be a part of UAA's Dietetics and Nutrition Department, one of the conference's partners. We too believe in having a healthy, nourished, food secure Alaska. The Dietetics and Nutrition Program is a nationally accredited statewide education program that meets the growing needs of dietetics and nutrition. We are an online program, so that means we get to expand our reach statewide, nationally, and even globally. I've had students from Kotzebue, Sitka, Washington State, North Carolina, even folks from Poland and South Korea taking my courses. I absolutely love it because we get so many different folks sharing their stories, which is so much fun. So to learn more about our dietetics program, go over to our exhibitors page on Whova, all right? The beauty of this partnership is that we believe in the same thing. We believe in having a healthier, more secure, more self-reliant Alaska by improving our food system. This in turn helps decrease the risk of chronic disease and improves health and wellness throughout the state of Alaska. In order to do this, we need to connect, we need to advocate, and we need to inform, which is exactly what this conference is about. And on top of that, It's National Nutrition Month. So can you tell I'm kind of nerding out over all of this? Our theme this year for the conference is Everybody Eats, Nourishing Culture, Our Health, Our Future. And this coincides with the National Nutrition Month theme of celebrating a world of flavors. Sounds so delicious, doesn't it? It's important to embrace everyone's culture and different cuisines. Food brings people together. It lets us share stories with one another. And this is exactly what our conference is about. Food is bringing us together. Food is allowing us to share our stories. And so throughout the next couple of days, we get to do that. We get to share our stories and we get to grow together. Are you excited? Can I see some reactions, claps, and woo? Yeah. All right. That's awesome. So with that said, I would like to introduce someone who will definitely bring us all together. It is my pleasure to introduce Stephen Holley from the Alaska Village Initiatives, who will give today's land acknowledgement. Stephen.
Good morning. Thank you, Melissa. My pleasure to be here. Welcome to everybody here. This Food Policy Council is a very strong part of our community and part of our sustainability in Alaska. And it's my pleasure to be able to participate at this level where we can actually bring in some of my culture, the Dena'ina culture. See, we here in the Cook Inlet, this is Dena'ina Ashnina, this is Dena'ina land. This is where we're from. And this acknowledgement is very important to me because I've been doing this for over 15 years. I remember my first 5 years into my career, nobody even knew who we were. I mean, for me, that was a big, how do I say this? I was uncomfortable with that fact. I mean, this is where I'm from. This is where I've always been. And now to be able to sit here talking with you all, welcoming you to this amazing conference, to acknowledge that we are a part of this land is something very special. I mean, this group that I have behind me, this is part of the kids that I teach our culture. And part of that culture is, how we exist on this land. The plants and animals give themselves to us. And so that relationship is understood by us to be a part of nature. We care for the land and it cares for us. And it's this continuous cycle that has been, it's been stopped. It's been hindered for a long time. I can't say it's been stopped. It's been hindered. You can't ever stop this connection. This is just who we are. And so I really want to thank the Food Policy Council for giving us this chance to be able to acknowledge this connection, this land acknowledgement. I mean, for me, I'm a part of the movement. This is a part of my life. It's to be able to bring us together so that we can look at our future. And a big part of that is understanding where we come from. We come from the land. Us Dena'ina, kind of exclusively straight here from the Cook Inlet area and the surrounding areas where our families reside. You see, I teach these kids about food. It's a big part of being a person of the community. Man, woman, and child, elders, we all eat. I love that. That's part of the theme. Because I mean, for us to survive, we need three things: food, water, and safety. And a part of being a part of the community is providing those. And in order to provide for that, we need to acknowledge our connection with those that help us sustain ourselves. It's a hard thing to give yourself for someone so that you can survive. And that's what the plant can do every day. So for us to acknowledge this is to acknowledge their gifts to us and what that means for being human. For us, Dena'ina, Dena'ina Elsnina, I want to say Nagadeninu, say welcome for this opportunity to be together, to talk about something amazing, our futures. Like I said, we need those three elements, People talked about the water protectors. Recently, my group, we welcomed the herring protectors. because they were up here fighting from the Southeast to be able to protect the family members within nature that helped them subsist off the land. In order for us to be here, we need healthy land. And so this acknowledgement gives us a chance to be able to show you how much we value those that we live with, the plants and animals, and what it means for us to be able to be a part of the system that cares for them so they can care for us. I want to say again, Chanan, Chikanik, to the Food Policy Council for this chance to be able to welcome you all, to be able to acknowledge that this is where we're from, because this is not our land. This is the Nana Osnina, but this is not our land. We inherit it for our youth, for those in the future generations. So thank you for this acknowledgement, and I welcome you to be able to join us as we move forward, knowing that we are together on the Nana Osnina, or wherever you are residing while you participate on this webinar at this conference, together with us in Alaska. Chanan, thank you.
And now I would like to introduce to you from our advocacy, from AFPC's Advocacy Committee, Kara Durr and Amy Seitz.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everybody. I am Kara Durr, and I am really pleased to tee up a couple pre-recorded videos we have from our two senators. So first, we're going to hear from Senator Lisa Murkowski, who is a leading voice on Congress food security issues. She's championed issues relevant to agriculture, to fisheries, and food insecurity. Recently, she sponsored legislation to expand the summer meals for kids, address supply chain issues, and support farmers, fishermen, and food processors, to name a few. She has also created and secured funding for the Micro Grants for Food Security program, which I'm sure some attending this conference have already benefited from. Here are her remarks to conference attendees.
Hello to all of you. Whether you grow, transport, or simply eat food, this conference is the can't miss event of the year. I do appreciate the opportunity to welcome you. The theme of this year's conference is Everybody Eats, Nourishing Our Culture, Our Health, Our Future. But the sad truth is, not every Alaskan eats every day. Far too many of our neighbors go hungry or do not receive the nutrition that they need to grow and thrive. And our goal must be to work together to change that. We must work together to help Alaskans be more food secure, to grow and store more affordable, nutritious food right here in Alaska, so that Alaskans don't have to rely on federal programs to avoid going hungry. To make more Alaskan food commercially available and affordable. Your goal for this conference, to increase connections and build community, is really more timely than ever. So count me in. One great example of connections is the partnership between ANTHC and Kodiak Island Wild Source. Now, as many of you might know, ANTHC leads USDA's food distribution program on Indian reservations, or FIDIPR, here in the state. And this ensures that low-income, food-insecure tribal members in 19 communities receive monthly boxes of USDA foods. So I raised this issue with the USDA yesterday. ANTHC is one of 8 tribal organizations across the country that are participating in this demonstration project to replace USDA foods with traditional foods that are produced locally by indigenous producers. So crazily enough, catfish raised in the lower 48 was being flown across country to be included in Alaskan food boxes. And so ANTHC has worked to supplant the raised catfish with halibut from Kodiak Island Wild Source. I think it's about common sense, but really, it's a good start. But apparently, ANTHC can only contract with Alaskan producers who offer commercially packaged foods. So again, I raised this with USDA. They acknowledge they've got to do more, but I think we have to do more to support Alaska's food producers and make more Alaskan foods commercially available and at prices that Alaskans can afford. Another positive opportunity is the micro grants for food security. This is a program that I created a few years ago. And in just the first year, this program has funded over 200 projects throughout the state. These projects will enable more families, farmers, tribes, and communities to grow, sell, and store more food. The Division of Ag will soon ask Alaskans for their applications for a new round of grants, and I would encourage you to apply. Back here in Washington, D.C., know that I'm going to be fighting to help fund more of these projects because the need and the interest is great. Going forward, Congress is also about to embark on a new farm bill, and I'm putting together my list of priorities. I'm calling it my Arctic Ag Bill, and I'm going to be counting on you to give me ideas for both new initiatives as well as improvements to federal programs. I know you're going to have a great conference full of innovative ideas, wonderful networking, and inspiration on how we can make a difference together. So have fun, and let's feed Alaskans. Take care.
Great. Okay, next up, we are going to hear from Senator Dan Sullivan, who has been involved in food security issues in a wide variety of ways. Recently, he's worked to get more Alaskan fish in our schools, to simplify paperwork for low-income seniors participating in the federal senior box program, and to ensure that lower-income military families have access to adequate nutrition resources. He is a regular and tireless volunteer at the annual Anchorage and Matsu Thanksgiving Blessing food distributions. Here is his remarks.
Good morning, everyone, and greetings from Washington, D.C., and thank you for the invitation to join you all today. I want to commend the Alaska Food Policy Council, Intertribal Agriculture Council, and the University of Alaska Dietetics and Nutrition, the all-volunteer force that put together another great conference. I've had the opportunity to attend and speak at your conferences before. I love what you do. I love the enthusiasm here, and I am so impressed once again, for another conference by the speakers and sessions that you have all put together. So congratulations, thanks for the great work. Now, I don't have to tell all of you, but this particular conference, what your focus on, could not be coming at a more critical moment. Your focus is on a vitally important topic, one that impacts all of us, especially in Alaska, and that's food security. You know, I'm hopeful, I'm thankful, we're all praying that we're finally putting this pandemic in the rearview mirror, but we know that the pandemic highlighted many vulnerabilities, but one was our vulnerability with regard to supply chains, especially for our state. We cannot always rely on the lower 48 for our essentials, especially food, even though we had those frontline workers during the pandemic in Alaska who did an amazing job for all of us, keeping our stores full, our shelves full. So I want to thank them again. But this risk is even greater. This risk of supply chain insecurity as it relates to food is even greater for our rural communities and our villages off the road system. So the federal government clearly has an important role to play in this area. And I think, hopefully you know, I've been a strong supporter of a number of programs, including robust funding for the SNAP and the WIC programs, two critical nutrition safety nets for the most vulnerable in our communities. The recently passed Omnibus Appropriations bill dedicates billions of dollars to both of these programs. You may have seen, I didn't vote for that bill. It wasn't that I wasn't supporting these kind of programs. It was a bill that was dropped on the Senate, 2,700 pages, $1.5 trillion, and about 24 hours to read and decide you're going to vote on it. To me, that's no way to run a government, and that was my main motivation for not voting. I couldn't get through it, couldn't read it. That shouldn't be how we operate here, but that was an important element of that bill. And just a few weeks ago, I wrote USDA Secretary Vilsack, urging him to evaluate increasing the amount of nutritious seafood used in WIC packages, which feed pregnant women and young children. The studies have shown, and I know you're all supportive of these, that WIC recipients are not getting the recommended servings of seafood that they need. And our fishermen and harvesters in Alaska are eager to meet that need. I always refer to our great state as the superpower of seafood. More than 60% of all seafood harvested in America comes from Alaska's waters. So let's get that food to some of our most needy. That's my goal. It makes sense. We should do it. That's what my letter to the Secretary of Agriculture was about. And last year, with Senator Murkowski and Congressman Young, we reached out to the USDA asking the department to partner with our community and seafood leaders on new regional programs that can do this, that can help promote food security, particularly, again, with Alaska's world-class, sustainable, wild seafood. These discussions are ongoing, and I know many of you are in close contact with my team on similar ideas. We want your ideas that are coming out of this conference. Some of the best ideas we have in terms of legislation and pressing the executive branch come from conferences exactly like the ones you are undertaking right now. There will be no shortage of good ideas, I'm sure, coming out of this conference. In the discussions you and all of you are having, I'm excited to learn about any new initiatives involving mariculture, wild harvest, traditional Alaska Native knowledge. That's so important. That will lead us to a more resilient and nourishing food system for our fellow Alaskans. So please stay in touch with my team. Know that my door is always open. Thank you again for the great work you do. It's been a tough couple years, and I want to thank all of you for helping us get through it. Have a great conference. Look forward to seeing y'all back home soon.
Great. Well, you heard them solicit feedback for the upcoming Farm Bill, which is great and is certainly something we hope comes out of this conference. The Alaska Food Policy Council has been working hard with a number of other entities in collaboration to put forward some Farm Bill recommendations for Alaska. And so the Farm Bill, as mentioned, not only oversees all the agricultural programs, it oversees many nutrition programs as well, such as SNAP, emergency food boxes, and senior boxes. And we would invite you all to join us in providing that feedback. One other opportunity I wanted to plug before we turn it over to talk about some of our advocacy committee work and some of the state level things we're doing is the Native Farm Bill Coalition, in partnership with the Intertribal Agriculture Council, will be hosting listening sessions in Alaska in June, in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau, and there will be virtual options as well. And we would really encourage anyone interested in really anyone who eats to participate in those listening sessions and provide some Alaska feedback. So more information to come on how to participate in those. But I do want to turn it over now to Amy Seitz, who is a fellow Alaska Food Policy Council board member and the advocacy co-chair with me.
Well, thank you, Kara, and good morning to everybody. Hopefully you're all coffeeed up and ready to be thinking about food security and policy. As Kara mentioned, I'm the co-chair with her for the Alaska Food Policy Council Advocacy Committee, doing lots of work on Farm Bill and also looking at state policy, which is what we are going to be talking about this morning with our special guest. So I'd like to introduce Representative Tarr. She's a longtime food and agriculture enthusiast and a champion of bringing awareness around food security issues to Juneau. She's been involved in many food and agriculture related organizations over the years and is an avid gardener herself. She has sponsored many pieces of legislation over the years to help increase local food production. She initiated the Food Security Awareness Week, which is bringing information to legislators around production and increasing access to food around the state. And then recently, we're excited, and part of what we're talking about this morning is, after many years of work, she's been key in bringing a bipartisan effort to Juneau through the Alaska Food and Farm Caucus. And so we are excited to have the chance to have an open dialogue with Representative Tarr this morning, hear a bit about what the Food and Farm Caucus is going to be working on in its beginning year. And then providing some feedback to Representative, and then also being joined by Senator Hughes, one of the other co-chairs of the caucus. So Representative Tarr, thank you. And during the discussion, if anyone has questions, you can type them in the chat. Kara and I will be facilitating that back and forth part. Get you questions and any comments. And you could also raise your hand using the reactions button at the bottom of your screen.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's step one. The volume is and speakers are working. Awesome. Well, it's really exciting to join you this morning. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who organized this great conference. I know that we're all looking forward to a time when we can be back together in person. And in the meantime, it's always great that we can do these virtual events so we can stay connected and keep in touch about all the fun and exciting things happening in the world of the food system of Alaska. Thank you, Amy, for the introduction. It's always so funny to hear yourself described, but it is true. I am an agriculture enthusiast, and it's been a long-standing part of my life. I actually went to school and got a botany degree, and so my interest in studying plants was really about sustainable agriculture, and I began working on farms and working on food processing, food production, food systems back in college. And so it's been really, really fun in my personal life to have that passion and be involved in different organizations, but exceedingly fun to be in the legislature and then be able to turn that passion into policy that hopefully improves our food system in Alaska. For all the reasons that we know are so important, food security, healthier foods. It's great for rural economic development. It's important in terms of the climate change conversation and how far our food is being shipped from here and there and increasing local production. Great for entrepreneurs. It's great for the Alaska lifestyle. So there's just so many reasons to be excited about this kind of work. And the thing that's been happening in the legislature, Amy mentioned, we've had a couple different names, but we've landed on the Alaska Food and Farm Caucus. And I'm really excited about this. We started talking about this idea a few years ago, and at the time I was in my legislative work co-chairing the House Resources Committee. And so we started having an agriculture week in the committee to really highlight the different pieces of policy that were agriculture related. The Resources Committee has jurisdiction over DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and that's where the Division of Agriculture is housed. But I'm not in that position anymore. And having that space now to think, well, okay, wait a second, what are the other ways that we can, be collaborating and highlighting this important work and the policies that, diversity of colleagues are introducing that could improve food security and strengthen our food system in Alaska. And coupled with that, as you've seen, we've had some difficulties in resolving some of our top issues, and it's, pushed the legislature into special sessions and, uncertainty around funding. And it's, just sometimes, and you may have also seen as a result of that fewer pieces of legislation have been passing. And so, when thinking about this, it's like, well, how do we, in these circumstances that we find ourselves in, do more and make sure that the opportunities to develop our agriculture industry, mariculture industry, and in Alaska grown and processed and produced kind of food products, how do we ensure that we have people working together to do that, even given, more difficult times in the legislature. And so that's really the kind of foundational thinking for why we want to have this Alaska Food and Farm Caucus. A couple important pieces about it, even, aside from setting the agenda of the work, it's bicameral, meaning we have both House and Senate members, and then it's bipartisan. So we have people that are, Republicans and Democrats and independents all participating. And in fact, what is so exciting is of the 60 members of the legislature, 30 of them have signed up to be members of this caucus. So that gives you a good sense of how many people are interested in the work that we can do here. And the hopeful part about this is that by having, this diversity of members from both bodies working together, that as we try to advance policy, that we can be more effective in those efforts and then, more efficient with our time. Some of us, and Amy Pettit is hopefully on, and Amy Seitz, of course, was a huge part of this effort to free the cheese, right? That was a bill that we got passed last year. But that bill took 4 or 5 years to get through. And so, reflecting on that experience, I think, if we come together as a caucus in the way that we are now, we'll have an opportunity to, reduce the amount of time it takes each of those things to get through. And in doing so, then, just, have, hopefully be creating more opportunity as we go. So the things that we want to work on, developing the agriculture industry, definitely thinking about small producers, thinking about how we can help people who are already producing upscale, thinking about how we can improve the opportunity for processing in state, and then developing the distribution markets to accompany that new processing. And then we also want to be thinking about sustainable fisheries and sustainable fishery management and mariculture opportunities. I know, in some of the workshops I've seen before, this has been a topic discussed. And in fact, I think I saw something on the agenda for this conference as well. So, the kelp farming, very fun things happening there. Barnacle Foods, people are probably familiar. Their, bullwhip sauce is very popular, right? And, they're getting a lot of attention and awards, which is really fun. Again, young entrepreneurs, rural communities, economic development, sustainability. It's so cool. It checks all those boxes. So, we want to be involved in that conversation because, right, if we're thinking about our whole food system, and where we're getting what we eat, then, we definitely need to consider the protein that comes from the sea, and then all of the new opportunities for mariculture, and make sure, that we're thinking about sustainability, because in all of our efforts, that's really important. And then we want to think about non-edible farm products like peonies and other export market opportunities for things like flowers, and what's happening with hemp. That's really exciting. I mean, we'll probably in the next couple of years actually start to see some of that come into production, and people turning to that opportunity. So that's very cool. So it's a huge agenda, really. But I think we have an opportunity to kind of be comprehensive in the way that we're thinking about it, and connect a lot of dots and bring a lot of people together, and hopefully that's going to be very successful. I just thought I'd talk about some of the bills that we're prioritizing this year, just to give you a sense of how that big picture is all coming together. So, for example, on the seafood side of things, we have a couple of resolutions we're supporting. Prior to Russia invading the Ukraine, there was already a export ban on our seafood, and so there's a resolution addressing that, and of course that in the political situation right now, that importance of that has changed. There's another trade related resolution as far as our seafood exports are concerned. We are looking at a resolution supporting a northern rail extension. Some people might be familiar with that project. That would connect Delta Junction and be a piece of, having a whole statewide rail system. And then there's also discussion of, a rail segment that would connect Alaska to the lower 48. These projects are probably, many years off and have been, in discussion for a long time. But in terms of the northern rail extension, there's also a Department of Defense component to that. And given what's happening right now, that may sort of elevate the interest in that project. On the agriculture side of things, we're watching closely what's happening with one of the governor's proposals. And it's a lands bill. And so it does things that are unrelated to agriculture, related to land disposal in the state of Alaska. But the part that we've been really watching is allowing for smaller parcels when we do ag land leasing and sales. So the smaller parcels would be 40 acres and 20 acres. There's some, good things about that. And then some, a little bit of concerns about that, how that might be applied. So we're looking at that. And then As part of that conversation, the legislation would also allow for non-ag related businesses to be on that ag covenant land. And there's some concern about what that means in terms of preserving farmland and agricultural covenant land for our future. So we're, kind of trying to work out the mechanics of that, of how we might move forward in a way that could be exciting in terms of these smaller acreage opportunities, but then gives us comfort that these other, potential unintended consequences won't happen in terms of the land not actually going into agricultural production. We have the animal secrecy bill, I guess is what it's being called this year, animal confidentiality records. For anyone who's been following the MOV situation, and there was, the conflict with the Wild Sheep Foundation. And I think at this point now, there's a piece of legislation that everybody feels comfortable with. It's the, addresses concerns of the Farm Bureau and the Sheep Foundation. That's Representative Rauscher's bill. We're supporting that. There's a couple of food freedom kind of related pieces of legislation that we're looking at. And so, it's exciting because there's, this diversity of pieces of legislation that are addressing a bunch of different things. And what is our first sort of work product and how this could work going forward. So for example, Representative Rauscher's bill about the confidentiality of animal records just went through the House Resources Committee and, came out. It just had the one committee hearing. And so then it goes to the House Rules Committee. And so, then that's the phase of getting a bill passed where you're trying to get support, enough support to take it to the floor. That means at least 21 members. And then of course the bill has to go to the Senate, and then go through the whole process. And here we are, March 18th today, right? And so you're looking at the clock and thinking, wow, how, we're going to have to really push this through to get it through this year. But through the Food and Farm Caucus, we did a letter of support, and almost every member of the 30-member caucus signed on. I think maybe one or two didn't. So now, we have this letter from 28 legislators, let's say, of both House and Senate members, expressing support. And so hopefully, that means we'll be able to more quickly get it through the House. And then, when it heads over to the Senate, the folks there will already have lined up, and be able to show, okay, Rep. Rauscher can go right, to the Resources Committee chair and say, look, all these senators have already even signed on to the bill as this being a priority. So this will be our first test of, how can we be, effective in working together. And, I'm very hopeful that we can be, because again, there's so many exciting things happening. So that's what we hope to do, is identify those priorities, work together to figure out, how to get to the place where a lot of us can support the legislation, and then work together to advance it so it can, get through the process a little more quickly. One item before kind of transitioning to some questions that I would like to get some feedback on from this group, and some of you would have been involved in the drafting of this, is that the governor has proposed $25 million towards, agriculture, sort of broadly. Initially, it was just 25 million. More recently, they've split it up into chunks. And we're having a lot of discussions around here because, one, not sure if there's enough support for that entire, it's like almost like a piece of dust just flew in my eye out of nowhere. Sorry about that. So, we're not sure if that full 25 million, will receive support and be funded. And so then the question is, okay, well, if it's not the full 25 million, what components of it should we look at? They're really keen on trying to get the Neanderthal jacket development going. But this is a raw land situation at this point. So we're, starting from ground zero. You have land clearing, utilities, you have to split up the parcels. So there's a lot of work to do there. So while that's very exciting and, has the potential to really improve food security for the long term, there's a lot of other existing opportunities. And so, we're looking at this money and thinking, okay, how do we maximize the potential and the impact of it? They have the 25 million slated to be about 15 million going towards the Nenana-Tolchakit project, for that land clearing for those utilities. But that's a pretty big sum of money. And then they have 7 million going towards food security grants. And we're really focusing on trying to secure that $7 million and try to sync it up with one of the capital requests that came from the Food Coalition for $6 million towards food processing and $1.5 million towards poultry was the more specific request that they had. We're saying more generally meat processing. But what we're hoping to do is, in that food security language, so it'd be 6 million that would be available for grants there, and then $1 million for meat processing grants. Kind of write the language in a way that a lot of different, businesses, organizations could be, able to access that funding. So for example, I can see Karen Ron, and I know the food bank has a capital request in. And so, we're pursuing that opportunity, and, I think there's a lot of support. It's just, you're always in this uncertain position, like until you're voting on the piece of legislation, how much funding might be available for what item. And so, I kind of see the 7 million as a little bit of a backup plan, to some of these other requests too, if we write it in the right way. And so the language right now, and I'll put a link to it in the chat, is included in House Bill 354, simply because we've been working on this, and we were a little bit under the gun on a deadline where we can no longer introduce personal legislation. So I just put this in so we'd have this language to start getting feedback to. And so, that's the part where we're really working on it right now, trying to get the feedback. And what you'll see is it's got two sections, one that's a farm development and improvement grant, and the other that's a meat processing grant. So the first thing is we're not going to call them grants. It's going to be a credit or incentive when we have the updated language. And then, on the meat processing, it's written pretty broadly. Oh, thank you, Amy. She put it in the chat. Written pretty broadly to cover, the poultry. It could cover, the capital request, but then also we know with all the troubles that we've had with the meat processing facility in the Mat-Su, that people are interested in other opportunities and thinking about across the state, how could we have additional processing capacity for meat, and even should we have a state inspection program that would be just for the purposes of inspecting meat that's sold in state, because the USDA stamp is what's needed when you're sending it out of state. But if we are developing our in-state market, we might have a different opportunity. And then on the farm improvement, farm development improvement, you'll notice that it's, kind of tries to be comprehensive. I looked at language from some of the federal grant programs and tried to, everything from land clearing to greenhouses to feed and fertilizers and animals. So want to make that, as flexible, if you will, as possible, while also having some parameters, because what happened in the budget last year was we put $7 million in for food security. And I had definitely a different idea about how those dollars were going to be spent. They ended up going to Department of Fish and Game, and then they ended up going to things like hatcheries and fisheries research, which in the big picture of food security is in fact, a necessary investment. But I think we had the idea that that was going to be a little more like getting food to Alaskans who were in need due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So now in this go around, we want to be a little more careful and perhaps, kind of put some direction around the spending so that, that doesn't happen again, right? Where we put this money in the budget and then we're like, oh, geez, this did not get spent on what we thought it could. And then the other piece of this with that farm development improvement is that, it would accommodate, folks that are already in production who want to, do something for season extension or build a greenhouse or, Plagiarisms, we've heard from them, increase the size of their herd, all of those could be allowable expenses. But then if there was someone who was totally new and starting up, land clearing and irrigation systems, all of that would be allowable expenses too. And the last thing I want to say about that is that in the bill you'll see right now, it's drafted to say up to $15,000 of reimbursable expenses for 3 years. So that would be 45,000 total, but we're going to change that to be 50,000 so that it could be up to 150,000 total over that 3-year period. And so the things I want to make sure is that organizations could be included. And so we're going to, try to close that loop in the language. And then on the business plan requirement, just considering whether we want to be a little more prescriptive, because we're not, I don't want to make a situation where you're expected to have some massive volume business plan, but just, there's been some criticism, from the micro grants, that there's like, when you look at the list of awardees, sometimes there's very limited information of how those dollars are going to be spent. And those are very, the small numbers. So maybe that's okay. But, if we're going to do this, where we're going to invest up to $150,000, maybe we want to have just a little more clarity on that so that, so that in the end, we get out of it what we thought we were doing when we put it in. So I'm just looking at the chat. I'll turn it over to you, Amy, for any comments or questions, but I am really excited about this caucus. I hope you are too, now that you're hearing a little bit about the things we're working on and what we want to do. And then just, please keep in touch. At each meeting, we're going to try and reserve 15 minutes for a group to present to us, because we're getting a lot of requests. So, please keep in touch if you're interested in sharing something you're working on. I see Emily posted in a couple of weeks, we're going to have the Rural Cap folks be our presenter. And I think we're going to hear from like the Community Land Trust. So, we're trying to fit in a little bit of that so that there's some learning happening about exciting projects happening around the state. And so we'd love to work with you on that as well. Oh yeah, Kara and Ron have presented at one, and Amy. So they could tell you if it was worth the investment, but I think so. We really appreciate hearing from folks. So thank you so much for letting me share, and look forward to any questions.
Yeah, and thank you, Representative Tarr. Since you just finished up talking about the incentive and grant program that's in the House Bill 357, touch on a couple of questions that came up on that. One is, who would manage those grants?
So the way it's envisioned now, and again, we're not going to call them grants because it's going to be more like an incentive or a credit. So you would, the vision here is that you would submit your business plan, right? There'd be an application period. You'd submit your business plan and get approved for a certain amount of spending. And then as that spending happened, you'd be able to submit and have some of that spending reimbursed. And so it's a credit in that sense. And the reason we wanted to do it like that is what and in any piece of legislation, there's always the question, do you want to put all the detail in the legislation, or do you want to kind of give the department some authority to kind of develop that criteria and the detail, if you will, from the regulations? And so we wanted to give the Division of Agriculture a little bit of flexibility in how this would be developed. So that's partly why you don't see, every single detail laid out there. So again, like on the business plan, that was what we were kind of thinking, like, we don't want there to have to, be some, something that's beyond the capacity of what, startup businesses or organizations might have, but also just a little bit of checks and balances and accountability in terms of, how this money might be spent. So just, trying to strike that balance between being supportive to the business or organization in terms of whatever they want to have that money for, but then, just, having that little bit of oversight. And so the vision is that, the department, and I didn't talk about this, but the way we would fund it would be through this fund. And so the money would be sitting there. And what we were hoping is then the program might work in a way where people could submit on a quarterly basis for reimbursement, so that you could almost be getting reimbursed in real time. And that again would reduce some of the pressure in terms of like how much an individual might need to invest on their own, their own financial investment, because maybe they're trying to get financing from a bank or something like that, but trying to make it so that you could get reimbursed as close to real time as possible, so that it just reduces some of that burden. So it would be the Division of Agriculture administering it, and hopefully with a little bit of that technical and business support, so that people could successfully submit the required business plan and application, and then have a pretty quick turnaround to reduce the financial burden of making those expenses and getting reimbursed.
And then on the organizations, because you had mentioned organizations could be included, are you thinking that'll mean nonprofits also?
Well, I think that's the thing we want to think about in terms of how far can this money go. We did the math, and so if you've got $6 million and each individual applicant was eligible for the whole 150,000, you could have 40 applicants total. So that's kind of the number to work with it. So then we think about it. Well, are there 40 applicants? And so with that micro grant program, like I say, when you look at the projects that were awarded there, very little in terms of requirements, right? A lot of kind of backyard projects that people could do, which is great, because there's a lot of really fun projects in there. But if we're trying to incentivize more agricultural development that will lead to additional food production to feed Alaskans and food security in the big picture that way, then maybe we want to try and just direct it a little bit. So for me, it's not so much about organization versus business versus individual, as much as directing the spending in a way that gets us to that intended outcome. And so I think organizations I'm okay with, businesses I'm okay with, individuals I'm okay with, but just that's why we want to have those little bit of sidebars with the criteria, kind of the business plan, and then awards, so that hopefully that spending can be directed in a way that, again, is more getting us towards that shared goal of improving food security.
Great. And just to wrap up, I think maybe the grant questions, and then we can kind of move on. There were a couple questions that came in the chat around funding for the Division of Ag, and if there would be funding included in this for more positions.
I think it's possibly necessary to have a position that is dedicated towards this. And so, that's something that we've sort of just started talking about, but I think, I think is possibly something we should consider. And, for a $7 million investment, right, it's, there's a few dollars in there that could really make a difference. And then again, have that strong support and quick turnaround. I think that's something that will be really important to making this work, is just reducing that financial burden that we know can be so challenging, particularly for startup. But that's the whole challenge with farming, right? You have to make the investment and then wait the whole year to hope you earn your investment back through your growing season. And so, if we can help, like with the investment part, where, okay, we're upscaling now, but now instead of having to wait my whole growing season to hopefully recoup that investment, some of that can be, reimbursed from the state. And, hopefully that makes that economic opportunity a little bit, more possible.
Thanks. And did just want to highlight, Catherine, with the Division of Ag shared in the chat, that there is a session on the micro grants today at 10:45. So I know we're getting a lot of questions on those as well. So I encourage people to join that session. But I see Stephen had a question, kind of moving on to a different topic. How do we build conversations to coordinated focused production for producers to grow products that can share the cost of infrastructure with the state? Is it a cooperative?
It's really interesting because there was just another message I received in response to the editorial that the co-chairs, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned the co-chairs, Senator Hughes, Senator Scott Kawasaki from Fairbanks, Representative George Rauscher from Sutton, and then myself. So 2 House members, 2 Senate members. We had just written something in the paper, and we got a email on this very topic about co-ops and the need for us to really think about facilitating them. In Delta, they do have a co-op that's very successful there. They're coordinated, for their feed and fertilizer, and we're able to see that. And I don't know, and I'm glad this question is going to prompt me to want to ask if they had any support from the state when they started that up, or if it was just initiated by the farmers in that area. But this is it is a important consideration of sort of how do we get everybody organized and then, make that be able to be a bigger part of the market share. I think, we're kind of focused on legislation right now because we're in this, kind of time crunch of this, having the next couple months of the legislative session to get some of these bills through. But I think this is, maybe more once we get to the interim, a conversation that we should have and kind of get some of the, more knowledgeable people, maybe people from Delta, maybe people from other states, to help us think about these different models. And, if there are things that the state needs to do to kind of empower it. For example, with this Nenana-Tolchakit development, there's the one part of it, which is the clearing of land and making land available. But you're never going to have a farming community until you have all these other pieces, which are going to include the feed and the fertilizer and the equipment and the mechanic. And, at least on some of those co-op models could work very well in terms of, getting things started. Also, prior to the Matsu meat packing facility going into the private hands, there was a proposal from some farmers to do a co-op for that. And in retrospect, I think there might be some people who are pretty disappointed that, we didn't try that in the first go around because, of course, since then it's changed hands again. So crossing our fingers for this go around to work. But yeah, I think, we should have those conversations. It might be a little bit difficult for this group right now because of the intense focus on these few pieces of legislation. But I would love to keep in contact with you and think about that as a conversation we could learn a little bit more on as we transition into the interim and are kind of thinking for new policy goals.
Great, thank you. Wanted to give people the opportunity, if they had questions, to take themselves off mute and go ahead and ask them. And if there are none, I have some. Of course.
I'll start. Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me? I think I'm on.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to hear more. I heard Representative Tarr say that the legislature is looking at possibly loosening restrictions on ag land, and I wanted to understand more about that and why.
Thank you. So this is a governor's bill, first of all. So and that's just kind of important in how this is evolving. So the governor put in this legislation. A big thing that happened, gosh, not last summer, but the summer before, just at the end of June, early part of July, was a bridge was completed in Nenana, and this, opened up this huge area, these Nenana-Tolchakit land area. And there's mental health trust lands, there's agriculture lands, there's, I think there's some native corporation land. So, this little bridge hadn't been completed in decades. I'm told that Jack Coghill, when he was the lieutenant governor, was pushing this project, just to give a sense of the timeline of how long people have been talking about it. So this bridge finally gets completed. And so now there's this huge undeveloped area of agriculture lands that the state is interested in developing. And the lesson learned from when the Delta Junction agricultural development happened was that during that time, they sold really large size parcels in the thousands of acre size parcels. And, you know, I wasn't here for that, but what I'm told, you know, sort of the lesson learned out of that was that for some that was just too big. And, you know, it ended up being like a recipe for being unsuccessful. Because it was so costly for land clearing. And again, this raw development, you know, when you're just starting from nothing, right? It's just this forested land, you know, you have to do everything. And so, you know, another lesson learned from that is, you know, doing some of that infrastructure, that initial infrastructure. So that's why with that $25 million that the governor has asked for, some of it is to do land clearing and utility, you know, put in utilities for this area, because again, you know, lesson learned from the Delta area was that makes it so costly that, you know, it was a recipe again for it not being successful. And, you know, the problem with that in terms of the work we try to do in the legislature is, you know, people then remember, you know, these stories of failure, and then, you know, you want to do something else and they're like, oh, well, you know, everything we've ever done has been a big failure and it's a waste of money and blah, blah, blah. So you had that Delta experience, you know, lessons learned. So now with this new development, you know, one lesson learned on the large parcel size. So, you know, this has been something that people have been really interested in seeing is these smaller parcels, 40 acre and 20 acres. And we know that, you know, small scale farms, you know, a lot of the farmers doing vegetables, for example, and farmers markets are, you know, producing on acreage that size or smaller. And so, you know, that is kind of trying to open up a new opportunity. And, you know, if you're doing livestock or grains, you know, you might want hundreds or thousands of acres, but, you know, maybe folks that are doing more custom market kind of stuff in farmers markets, you know, they can do the 20 and 40 acres. And, you know, that way you can have that diversity in your farm community as it develops. So that part is pretty positive, I think, and people would agree, because that was, again, as I understand it, kind of that a lesson learned from prior efforts. But what has become a little concerning is the proposal to allow development other than agricultural development on that land. And so, for example, we know that a lot of farm to table, bed and breakfast kind of things are happening, or people, you know, are converting a farmhouse to be in bed and breakfast to try and bring in an additional income, because, you know, we know it can be difficult to make a living, you know, support a family on just the farm income. So people have been looking for, you know, agro-tourism opportunities, and it's really cool, right? The farm tours and people having weddings and, you know, big whatever events, family events, those kind of things on farms. That's a cool thing, and a fun learning experience. You know, we want more people to understand how food was grown. But again, if we're spending $25 million, you know, or at least $15 million of it, and passing legislation with the idea that this new development and all this investment is to improve food security in Alaska, then there's concern, because the potential exists for that land to be developed in a way that doesn't lead to agricultural production that leads to improved food security. So, you know, what people don't want is the circumstance where the person says, okay, well, you know, I'm going to build my bed and breakfast first, and then, you know, and then we'll do the farm development. But once, you know, we build the bed and breakfast, you know, that'll be our income that we need. And then that income, you know, will allow us to then, you know, move on to farming. But, you know, we started the bed and breakfast, and wow, that's a lot of work. And you know what, the farm's just never going to happen. And so now we have these agricultural covenant lands, you know, specifically set aside to be for agricultural development, that are being used legally, because we did that through legislation, you know, and we allow that in a way that actually isn't for agricultural production. So we sought out a legal opinion on this, and unfortunately, sort of on the enforcement side of things, it's a little bit challenging because it's sort of like, how would you determine what means agricultural production? You know, people are required to have a farm plan, but would you say, you know, you have to be, you know, such percentage into production at such time? It's just, we talked through a bunch of different options, and it was just very challenging to kind of like figure out how you would actually do that. But their other recommendation was, absent an enforcement mechanism, you could choose an incentive mechanism. And that's where the idea to do what's in House Bill 354 came from, where we would incentivize the spending that was related to agricultural production and food, you know, food processing and value added, all of that. You know, we would incentivize that in such a way that hopefully then it would make it the most attractive part of that. And then, you know, maybe the other thing could come later as a supplement, but, you know, the main thing that would be accomplished would be the food production piece. I'm not sure. Amy's got her hand up. I'd love to hear her reaction. I don't know that people are like, if we've closed the loop on people being comfortable with that, but we're still working with legislative legal to try and like figure that out. And the other opportunity is maybe just removing that language from the bill at this time, you know, allowing for the smaller parcels, but then revisiting that other development issue later. So I hope that answers the question, and it's sort of technical, but trying to get at the main points there.
And Amy Pettit with your hand raised, if you want to.
Yeah, well, huge thank you to you, Representative Tarr, for taking the time this morning and getting into so many details. I really appreciate it. I'm sure everyone does. I really love that you're going to look at, you know, first farm, then secondary farm business, because I think that's critical. And I think there's tools that currently exist that you could do that. Is the person filing a Schedule F? Are they claiming farm income first before they create that secondary business? Also, as you know, I'm a huge proponent to agricultural production requirements on those ag lands that are sold. Currently, with agriculture covenants of properties sold by the state, there is no production requirement. You simply cannot modify the land to where it couldn't be used for agriculture, but you only have to clear the land. You never have to produce a single agricultural item on land sold by the state. So I would love to see some tighter language on that. And I think many members of industry would as well. But I also just want to quickly say that in the incentive idea, I love this, that we're going to get some improvement credits and some incentives. And I think that we should keep in mind that opening up Nenana-Tochaka is an incredible idea. It's probably 10 years before the first potato is grown though, right? What are we doing today to protect and incentivize existing farmlands? Obviously in the Mat-Su Valley, it's a huge concern. $40,000 an acre land is being sold for. What farmer can afford to raise food when their mortgage is, you know, at $40,000 an acre? So what are we doing in that regard? And secondarily, I just heard from a producer in Delta Junction, there's some 8,000 acres in Delta Junction that's already designated as farmland, but isn't currently being farmed. What can we do to incentivize some of those farmers to expand production? So just some ideas, but I love where you guys are headed, and I love that you're considering the input from industry so strongly. So truly appreciate your time and really glad that you're here.
Thank you. And it's so exciting. I don't know if we're seeing in your last days of your role as Executive Director of the Farmland Trust, but yay that Amy Pettit is going to be the Farm Service Agency Director. That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And you know, the incentive, that's why it's written as farm development and improvement. And, you know, I'm not attached to that language at all. So, you know, people are way smarter than me. You probably have the better idea. So, you know, please let me know. But the development was, okay, if you're a Nenana-Tochaka or, you know, anywhere in the state, frankly, that you know, are trying to start a new farm. But then, you know, what about, I see Brad St. Pierre just wrote a comment, you know, what about folks like him? Or I thought of Plagermans, they were at one of our Food Security Week presentations. You know, they're looking to increase just as much as soon as they can afford to, you know, make that investment to increase the size of their herd, they can increase production. So, you know, this is written in a way that it would accommodate both. Now, right now, again, it just has that one requirement of the business plan without a lot of detail. You know, if we should put some additional language in there that says that the department should provide technical support, you know, maybe that's something that should be considered. Or you know, because one comment we got back was, again, you know, well, what does business plan mean? You know, we don't want to make it something that, you know, a small operation that can't afford to hire the professional to write the business plan is somehow excluded from this program. To me, that's absolutely not what I want at all. But again, it's just, you know, just making sure that someone's on the right track and that the idea is, you know, possible. And, you know, if there's some places where the idea is too optimistic or, you know, for whatever reason, you know, again, maybe you can provide that support to help them think, okay, well, you know, this you could do, but you need to stretch it out over 2 years because, you know, you're whatever shipping and, you know, just all the logistics that would come into it. So, Amy, we do want it to be, you know, Delta farmers, you're ready to go. You want to do something seasonal extension. You want to, you know, increase the size of your herd. You know, this funding's available for you. Or, you know, someone who's doing new farm development and land clearing, you know, they could apply as well.
Great. And sorry.
It looks like we have a hand raised by Carl.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious because I've done farming on unproductive land. It took me about 3 to 5 years to create the soil necessary for production. I did small scale, so I only had about 1.5 acres on 5 acres. But what I did with the other acreage was improve the water quality habitat by maintaining a wetland in the farming area. And also, so that was about a little bit of agroecology. And so I think that's a big plus. I know that NRCS puts that as a plus on their applications. But I was also, you know, looking at agroforestry. And, you know, there's a lot of indigenous uses of plants and medicine. So production might already be there in the existing lands. So I'm a little concerned about this clearing process when you can actually have you can actually build carbon into the soil using agroecological and agroforestry processes that also provide food for the community. So that's just something I wanted to ask if there's any type of priority for folks that are already doing that or have that expertise.
Thank you, Carl. That's such a great question. And there's not currently written in because, again, there's not that much detail written into it, but it's an interesting thought because there could, you know, that's something that could be considered as, you know, sort of projects, you know, we could just write that into it. You know, projects can be prioritized for this or that reason. And so, you know, if you wanted to say that projects that, you know, have these other conservation components, you know, should be prioritized or, you know, that should be included as a criteria, you know, that's something we could definitely consider. And I'm glad you brought that up. You know, as, you know, someone who's really interested in permaculture design and I know other folks, you know, on here as well, you know, that's absolutely how we want to think in terms of, you know, overall habitat and ways to incorporate the natural assets into what you do for additional food production. Thank you for that comment. Also, I just got a message. I think Senator Hughes is on with us now. So if we want to bring her into the conversation, I am going to cut and paste the chat and so I don't miss anyone's comments too, in case anybody has said anything or made suggestions for us things we should talk about as a caucus. So keep those comments coming, but very excited to see one of our other co-chairs has joined us.
And yes, while Senator Hughes is coming on, we are saving the chat box, Representative Tarr. So yeah, we'll be able to.
Perfect. Thank you.
You all hear me now?
Yes, we
Can you
can.
all hear me now? Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank Representative Tarr for being available for you the whole time. I was in another meeting, so I've just stepped out, and I don't want to be duplicative. I'm sure she's done a fantastic job giving you a report, but I will say it is an honor as well as exciting to have put together the Food and Farm Caucus and to have such bicameral, bipartisan support. And we're up to 30, maybe even 31. I'm not sure what our latest, but it sounds like she's talked to you about some of their priorities, but I couldn't think of a more perfect time for receptivity to pushing forward some of these ideas. And one of the things we've dug up, and I actually am hoping to review them over the weekend, is learning a little bit about some of the boondoggles we've had in the past, so we don't repeat that, because that's not going to be good for our goals here. So ideas from you all on things that would truly work and we'd have successes. You know, we want to come out of the gate here, even this legislative session, with some wins to kind of keep the momentum going. And I've had, and I haven't even told Representative Tarr this, but conversations with Senator Click Bishop, who is the co-chair on the Senate Finance Committee. So he's the one who schedules the various bills, and he's very supportive. And at the same time, we want to have something that will truly work, that will help bring in new agricultural entrepreneurs, as well as help the existing farmers expand. So that's what we're looking to do. And I unless, Geran, there's a particular area you didn't talk about, I just don't want to repeat, because I didn't hear what you've already shared with them.
I talked about some of our priorities. I didn't mention the farm structure priority, and maybe you want to mention that, Senator Hughes?
Okay. Yeah, when I very first came into the legislature in the House a number of years ago, my very first bill applied to what we called the back 40. I think we even made some buttons about back 40. It was House Bill 40. And what it would allow was a local option for boroughs, municipalities to exempt farm structures from property taxes. And that was born of an idea, meeting with the Mat-Su Farm Bureau, who indicated they were throwing out food and vegetables at the end of the season, because to have a structure to store it, to continue to supply the grocery stores, it didn't pencil out economically. And so that actually, in our borough is interested in bringing that back up. And we discovered, and as a naive freshman in the legislature at the time, I was so excited that it had passed, but I didn't realize that they had put a sunset date on it. And so now we're looking at that sunset date. So we want to get that removed, and hoping possibly to get that in the bill regarding ag land. So that's just one tool. And of course, for the unorganized areas, that wouldn't apply. But for the Fairbanks area, the Kenai, the Mat-Su, and even in the Anchorage area, that could be a tool that would be useful. Are there any questions that I can respond to? I'm not sure what all you've been talking about, but.
Well, I wonder, Kara, if I can jump in, because while Senator Hughes was talking, I was able to look at the chat and a few things that we hadn't gotten to yet. So Emily Garrity had something about the state land lease process, and could that be streamlined? And Emily, that's something I'm happy to look into if you want to send me an email. I would love to look into that, and just, that could be something I think people might be interested in. I've had the comment, and there was a second comment about this, about concern about outsiders coming in and purchasing land. And that's actually something we've talked about at some of our caucus meetings. So I know folks have that concern, and that's something, as we continue to work on this legislation, we'll keep that in mind, and think if there are ways, that we can better situate things to advantage Alaska-based businesses. Again, foundational to what we're doing is we really want to improve food security, for Alaskans, right? For those of us who live here, we talk about the response to the pandemic and, all these other things, the earthquake in December of 2018, which, thankfully the port of Alaska did not crumble into the water then, because we would have been in a really bad situation. I think I heard recently it would take something like 250 airplanes every week to replace what is brought in through the port. And a lot of our food comes in that way. So just kind of for perspective. So we do have a concern. And then Brad had a question and comment about what can we do to incentivize development that's closer to where the populations are. And that's exactly the reason why, we're thinking about Delta, and then even, where you are in Fairbanks and surrounding areas, the farm improvement idea is specifically because we want people who are already farming, and have, markets that they're selling into, and a customer base and everything. We want that opportunity to be available for you. So Brad, if there's something more specific on that topic that you want to get in touch about, or if I'm missing it, please do get in touch. And that's as far as I got in the comments in the time that Senator Hughes was talking, but I just wanted to try and respond to a couple of those. Yes.
Geran, have you talked about infrastructure at all as part of this conversation? The kind of the big picture, the system picture of statewide?
Well, I just talked a little bit about the incentives that we're talking about, and our interest in, directing some of the funding that the governor's proposed towards projects in the way that we in that context. That's all I said.
I want to kind of zoom up into space a little bit and look back at the planet, so to speak, because part of I think it was at our first caucus meeting, there was an excellent discussion about, we want to help all the existing folks, and from whether it's a small farm to a larger farm. But if we're truly going to have increased food sovereignty and not be so reliant on the outside of Alaska, there are certain things that will have to be at a larger scale at some point if we're serious about that. And that takes a system-wide approach where you have to think about infrastructure, and, for instance, getting the rail between Delta and Fairbanks completed, or between Delta and North Pole, so that those products can get on the rail line. So things like that we have to think about. Another interesting thing from some of the farmers in the Delta area, the existing farmers, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Geran, but if someone is going to be an ag producer 100% and not have little side businesses to help support his or her family and really go big time production, they need a certain percentage of that to be export in order for it to pencil out. And I think we have to keep an open mind and about that. And even with the port in Nome, now there's funding that's going to be coming from that, and the Arctic area opening up as far as for shipping. And you think about the markets in Asia, Japan is pretty landlocked, high population. They're going to have needs. That's just one example. So part of making sure we have the food here in our state, we're going to have to keep an open mind to the kind of infrastructure that would allow export of some products, because there will be the opportunity for some large farms. And when I was a little girl, I came up to Alaska as a teenager, but when I was a little girl, I lived in Ohio, and my grandparents, they had come and were farmers, and we used to drive through Iowa to Nebraska, and just hundreds and hundreds of miles of farms. And the fact of the matter is, we have more acreage of ag-rich soils than any other state in Alaska. We just haven't really tapped them. So I just want to bring up this concept of infrastructure too, because we often don't think of it quite in the way. I think if we truly want to have greater food independence, we're going to have to think on a larger scale. So I just want to make that comment.
Well, that is a great comment to end on, and aspirational, certainly. We are just about out of time, but wanted to thank you, Representative Tarr and Senator Hughes, both for joining us today, and of course for your leadership on the Food and Farm Caucus. We're very excited to see what comes out of that, and look forward to opportunities to engage with you all. So right now we've got about a 15-minute break, and we will rejoin together at 10:15. You've got some time to find your various sessions, and look forward to continuing this great conference with you all. Thank you.